Thank you all for joining today. I'm just going to give this a couple of seconds here just to make sure that everybody that wants to be here is here. Great. Please do let us know if for any reason you're having issues with the audio or the video portion of the webinar. Today's webinar is on the Progress Telerik reporting solution. And in particular today, we're going to be focusing on the Telerik Report Server and how it can be used to solve 5 key data reporting pains. So, by way of introductions, my name is Richard Zaslow. I'm a senior sales engineer here at Progress Telerik, and I'm in the Dev Tools or Developer Tooling division. I've been here for well over 6 years, actually, with Telerik and with Progress, and I support our entire portfolio of desktop, web, and mobile UI-related products. Lately, though, I've spent a lot of time focusing on our exciting Telerik reporting and Telerik Report Server products, as well as on our Kendo UI framework, which is a great framework for Angular, React, Vue, jQuery, and .NET web development, actually integrated also into our reporting products. So let's do a little bit of housekeeping here first, right? If you would like to ask questions or you would like to interact with us during this webinar, you can use the questions panel, and we've got associates that will be helping to answer these questions. You also have the option of tweeting us. You can use hashtag #HeyTelerik, and we will be manning that also. I just want to let everybody know that we will be recording this video, and it will be available on our youtube.com/Telerik channel, which is the Progress Telerik. I really recommend you go there and subscribe. There are a bunch of really useful, helpful, informational videos on many of our products. So with that being said, what I'd like to first ask is really, why does someone consider a reporting solution? And really what it is that it's very, very important in today's world to have quick, accurate information on the state of a business. That's really important to business managers and in a highly competitive environment to know where you stand. Managers certainly need that information when they're managing products, and it's important. So a lot of companies go out and they'll purchase a full-featured BI or business intelligence platform, something like a Tableau or maybe Power BI or something of that nature. Those are pretty costly, and they are complex, and they require a lot of IT interaction, training for your end users, and it's hard to really manage the cost, with the runtime licensing that's involved in that. And what I'm proposing here is really, that might be a little bit of an overkill for what you really may simply need, which is integrated reporting capabilities, that will allow people in the organization to get reports on a timely basis that they can export and or print, or maybe, provide things to their end users, such as invoices or statements through their application. So if you were thinking about embedding some kind of reporting functionality in your existing application, I think these are some important criteria that you need to choose that reporting solution. So one of them really is flexibility, right? You have existing applications, perhaps .NET web applications, desktop applications. You simply want to quickly and easily embed reporting capabilities inside of this application. But you want to know what the cost is going to be for that. So you want an economical licensing model. You want predictable licensing that you know up front how much it's going to cost, and you're not going to be having these runtime fees that can help you, go over your budget. You need to bind your reports to all kinds of data, whether it's SQL, Oracle, MongoDB, or you have a business layer, or you want to bind to the entity framework or anything. So that's very, very crucial. You want to be able to easily author these reports, right? So we're either using your in-house developers or maybe self-empowering non-technical business users to create these reports. And the reports really should be fully stylized reports that present rich graphics and dashboard-like displays, and that can be very easily interacted, filtered, sorted, so forth. And you want to be able to embed these reports easily within your application and be able to serve it in that BYOD, bring your own device world, basically. And these reports really should be able to be exported as Excel, Word, PDF, PowerPoint, or faithfully printed by an end user to take offline. And I think what's really important is you want to make sure that there's optimal performance for this whole thing, that it's, if you have a high, concurrent request for reports, that you're not going to crash a server. So I think you have a couple of options here, right? One of them is build yourself, cobble something together, or buy. So what I want to talk about now is what are the developer pain points, right? There are a number of complex tasks, and I think they can be very daunting for a development team that decides they want to roll their own reporting solution. So I want to highlight some of these here first. I think one of the key ones really is if you want these highly interactive, rich display reports, that you need a report designer that's going to be able to, create these richly styled reports that are going to be able to bind data into these reports. Developing something like that on your own, I can tell you from experience, is a daunting task. And then you want to be able to maybe take the onus off of your developer in-house staff and empower non-technical users to be able to add, to edit, and publish these reports without having to have your development team involved all the time. And then you need a place to store, you need a framework where you can store these reports, where they can be managed, right? Where you can carefully control authentication and access to these reports. And you want to probably be able to implement some way to schedule and deliver these reports, in an offline or off times scenario. And these reports should be, most typically sent in a nice email with the format that the end user needs. Again, as an Excel or as a PowerPoint. And then you need to be able to monitor data changing. So there are managers out there that need to know when an important data point changes, and you want to be able to understand that and kick off an automated resending of a report that shows that updated data. So, these are things that you would have to figure out how to enable if you're rolling your own application. And not only that, you have to think about maintaining the documentation for that, right? Because somebody that wants to use that needs to go somewhere and figure out how to do certain things. And then what if your end user starts saying, oh, there's a bug or it's not working with this browser or this operating system? You have to manage and resolve these bugs and be able to pump out new releases. Those things are time consuming, I can tell you that. But fortunately, I think there is an easier alternative that can be considered. So what I want to talk about is the Progress Telerik reporting solution. And just to let you know, I'm using some slides here just to kind of frame this at a higher level, but that's going to end soon. And then I actually pre-recorded a 23-minute comprehensive walkthrough of the report server. The reason we pre-recorded it is because a lot of technical glitches could happen, and I really don't want to slow things down here, but also will be available during that for live chat questions. So the Progress Telerik reporting solution is actually comprised of two separate products. So one of those is our long-standing Telerik reporting developer SDK. So this is all the building blocks that you as a developer would need to take your existing .NET application, whether it's a web forms, MVC, or a desktop WPF WinForms, and be able to build integrated reporting capabilities into it. So Telerik Reporting Developer 8 SDK really consists of a reporting engine It's really a DLL or two that you add into the back end of your application. It's the logic that knows how to determine that you have reports that were created with one of the Telerik reporting designers residing as resources within your application, typically in a folder inside your application. And Telerik reporting allows you to also embed platform-specific report viewers in the front end and to connect that with a Telerik REST service to make requests to the reporting engine to get these reports, to populate them, and to deliver them for viewing inside your application. So all of this is available before we even start to talk about the Telerik Report Server, and also integrated into that report server. But we did come up with a second product a few years ago, and that is the Telerik Report Server. And it really is an add-on to enhance Telerik reporting applications, and it's also a standalone application, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, basically, but it's more of an end-to-end reports management environment that can also empower end users in the organization to view, create, edit, manage, schedule reports. And we're going to dive into that much more deeply. So the Telerik Reporting Developer SDK, let's just cover that quickly with some slides because it is the heart of the report server. It is the types of reports that you can create that are going to be used as resources in the report server, and gives you a feel of the type of powerful reports that you can create. So again, Telerik Reporting, it's specific to the .NET environment. So where the Telerik Report engine runs, it needs to be on a .NET server, but the front end where you view reports does not have to be in a .NET environment, and I'll talk more about that later. But it's really a lightweight .NET reporting platform, and it's designed to satisfy the reporting needs for a modern business. It's a mature reporting solution. It goes back to 2007 timeframe, and we've built a feature-rich set for creating and delivering really richly styled, fully interactive reports. So let's talk a little bit about designing Telerik reports. So we really worked hard with Telerik reporting to be able to empower report creation without having to get in there and do much coding at all. So within our designers, we have built-in report wizards, so click-through kind of environment where you can select a predefined layout. So that could be a tabular report, could be a crosstab report. You can then configure data sources for that report. So a main data source and maybe data sources for tables that are inside of that report. You can then choose a professionally styled theme, and you can very quickly jumpstart that report creation and be able to, as you do this in the designer, preview your changes without having to publish anything at all. So we have extensive data source components available as part of Telerik reporting. So there's a SQL data source that binds to any kind of a relational database. There's cube data source for OLAP data. You can use the entity framework. You can use a CSV file and distribute that as part of your report for offline viewing. There's also a new web service data source that allows you to very quickly and easily bind to some kind of a REST service that returns JSON or OData. And then there's a really flexible object data source that really just does like a get data, and you implement that on your own, and you can bind to any middle tier. So extensive capabilities for that. So let's just talk about this standalone report designer, right? So this is basically a desktop designer, and it's pulled down to a desktop, and it could be used by your in-house developer, or it could be used by a power user that you want to grant the capabilities to create or edit reports. But basically, it's a codeless drag and drop type designer. So you have the capability with a design surface to be able to add position style report items. So you drag a text box or something of that nature, and you can perfectly position it, right click on it, and have a properties area to go in and set most of the CSS like styling properties and expressions that bind data into that report item. And as you're doing all this, as I talked about, you have a preview button, and you can actually preview these changes as you're designing right on the desktop. And we worked really hard with this designer to ensure that because it's got snap to positioning and it's got rulers, you can make sure that when you design your report, that it's exactly the way that it's going to render as a PDF or a print locally for your end user. Telerik reports that are designed in this designer are a .trdp, Telerik Report Definition Package. And what that really is the XML definition of the report. And then it's a zip really that contains any other resources that may be needed to run that report basically. So what I want to really highlight here is the fact that you can really get richly styled reports with Telerik reporting. We have the CSS-like styling mechanism. It quickly allows you to select something like the text box, right-click, go to the properties, and to be able to define border color or the background colors of the font to be used or the text display. So very easy. And the cool thing about all of this is that it creates a style sheet for that report. And you can actually take that style sheet and export that out, and then you could apply that to other reports. So that gives you the capability to create your own sort of corporate branding for your reports. There's also a lot of Excel-like kind of functionality in Telerik reporting too. So there's a format builder. So say, for example, you have a table has a cell in it. You could right-click on that cell and, format the date or format it as a currency, basically. There's also great conditional formatting too. So, if you've got a data point that you need to monitor to be within a range and to notify somebody that this has gone out of range, you can do conditional formatting very easily. Telerik reports are really interactive, right? So as you can sort of see here, this is one of the reports that's on our demo site for Telerik reporting, and it's a crosstab report. And it does show a lot of this interactivity, right? So first of all, reports can have parameters built into them. When they're viewed in this Telerik report viewer, it provides like the proper drop down or input to be able to allow end users to go and filter that data. And you have to realize that it's in a report viewer in the front end of your application. If somebody's interacting with it to filter it, it's going to always request back to the server side to redraw that report again with the new parameters and return it. So there's a lot of understanding of how to create that communication with the back end. But reports can have drill down capabilities. So you can have collections of columns or collections of rows and set those to collapse expand. You have a capability to create drill throughs for reports too. So if somebody, like in this, clicks on this little link and they want to get more information on how that data comes about, it makes a request for a new report that's on the back end, passing parameters to create that report and to return that. You can also see, I think, that they're a customizable tooltip. So when you hover over something, you can create a customizable tooltip. There's a lot of really rich interactivity with the Telerik report if it's in a web browser, as an example. You can also create report books. So you can create a collection of reports and then you can cobble them together in a report book. You can create a table of content that will have bookmarks to be able to have an end user go directly to one of those reports. A cool thing about this is when you export to PDF, those bookmarks actually are preserved. So this will work in a PDF also. Also, reports can have hyperlinks in them. So you can have a hyperlink that would, when somebody clicks that, can open another URL in a separate window. So what I want to talk about now is you've got these great reports. Most typically, without our report server, you're integrating all of this inside your application, sort of in a reports library, right? So how do you access those from the front end of your application? So Telerik Reporting Developer SDK gives you a collection of embeddable report viewers. So we have a collection of these report viewers for WPF, for Windows Forms, but we have this really exciting one that we call the HTML5 report viewer. And this is a fully responsive viewer that we actually dog fooded and used our own Kendo UI framework, a collection of jQuery-based JavaScript widgets that are fully responsive, that know how to determine the screen width and take a toolbar and collapse it to a hamburger menu for a side drawer slide-in type thing. But this HTML5 report viewer is the perfect solution to embed, say, in an Angular 6 front end or a jQuery or any kind of a SPA application, and be able to make requests to a .NET backend and get a report for viewing. So just quickly how this sort of works, just so you have an understanding, is, you know, you take this widget, this report viewer, basically, you're embedding it, for example, in a web page, and then you could create a form around that web viewer that allows end users to toggle, drop down, and say, I want to get this report with this start date, this end date, so forth. You then can pass a request, which is really like using a URI report source from the front end, saying, I want to go to my back end where the reporting engine lives and where the REST service has connected this viewer to for the requests, and I want to find a report and I want to populate it, map data into it with the embedded data sources, and give it back to the front end. That report is delivered for viewing inside the embedded viewer. So all of this now, without the report server, you're going to have to use an implementation of a Telerik reporting REST service and reporting engine that you set up on your own in the back end, perhaps within your existing .NET application. But you are responsible in this scenario for authenticating your users, for dealing with roles if you have to do scheduling or any of those more advanced functionalities. You need to do that, you know, on your own and roll it around our embedded reporting engine. But this is where I want to show you where the Telerik Report Server can be used. So the Telerik Report Server is an end-to-end Telerik Reports management application that we give to you as a fully customizable turnkey solution. And you know those 5 points we talked about back in the beginning, it provides a great and easy way to accomplish those, right? So first of all, that designer that we just kind of took a quick look at there is fully integrated within the Telerik Report Server, right? So you can give end users the capability to get that directly to their desktop through a click once deployment or some other way, and it's fully integrated by HTTP to that report server instance so that they can then push and pull reports on their own. So perhaps maybe you did have an in-house development team create some jumpstart reports and you see them in our report server. You can allow non-technical people to take those now down to their desktop, modify them, preview them, change them, and redeploy them to that report server repository with versioning. So it's a repository for storing and managing Telerik reports. So again, that .trdp type report functionality, it stores reports of that type, and it provides highly configurable access. So you can define who gets to these reports and whether they have the right to view those reports or whether they have the right to edit those reports. And it simplifies scheduling and delivery of those Telerik reports. I'm going to show you how easy it is to create a scheduled service or task for a report that resides there and be able to send that off at a given time to your subscribers with an email attachment of that report in the format that they want to see, using a highly configurable template for that email. And then you can even easily create data alerts, basically, that will monitor the underlying data that a report uses, check for something that changes, and if it does change, set it specifically for a time to be checked and sent off to concerned parties. So the other thing, when we talked about documentation, right, we continuously update our implementation and our user's guide online. So you're never going to have your implementation team or your end users in the dark about how to accomplish something. We even expose the REST. We have a REST API for that report server that's fully documented, and that your developers who are in-house that may be C# savvy can actually access the report server interface and all of the features and functionalities from C# code in your own application. There's a cool feature, webhooks. We'll talk more about that in the demo itself. But basically, the other great thing is that we provide full white labeling and localization options for this Telerik Report Server. So yeah, when you install it initially with one of our installers, you can certainly see that it's branded according to our schema, but you can remove all that. You can change icons, you can change colors. I'll show you how to do that. And then you can localize the strings of the report server's web application too. So if you've got, end users that are designing reports in other countries, they have the strings on the designer to be more intuitive to them. And we've worked really hard to create accessibility support in this. So first of all, when you're working with the web server interface itself, that you have the capability to use navigation and shortcuts and tabs and so forth. And then also when end users are interacting with the reports in the report server areas, there are dynamically generated descriptions, textual details that will certainly help them. So that was a lot of slides, that was a lot of talking. What I really want to do now is I'm going to switch over to this pre-recorded demo so you can really see all the functionality, but I want you to understand that you can ask questions during this entire presentation, and we'll be back live again after that to finish it up. So let me go ahead now and just run this report server demo. Now for the fun part. So we are going to take a solid look at the Progress Telerik Report Server and talk about how you install it and the features that it offers and see some of these in action. So first thing I want you to see is that I've installed this locally on my laptop, and when you install it, it's really a lightweight website that you need to spin up. And it has to be spun up on a .NET server that has .NET 4.5.1, IIS 7+, and an HTML5 compatible browser to access the interface and to use the integrated report viewer to view reports. But it's set up in its own application pool, and when you install it, you can install it using the Progress Telerik control panel and select the report server, and you can install a 30-day trial version that can easily be converted to your commercial version once you purchase a Telerik report server license. Alternatively, you can log into your Telerik account and download an offline MSI installer to set this up. When you run the installation, it's going to basically walk you through a number of configuration settings, basically. Since I didn't have time to install this in front of you, we'll talk about those configuration settings. So if you want to use the report server to schedule and deliver reports as email attachments, you'll need to configure a mail server. So I've done that here. I'm using an SMTP host that I have. You will also need to define where you want reports stored. Do you want them stored on the file system where you've installed the report server, or you also would have an option to use a SQL Server database and be able to save the reports as blobs in that database. You will also need to define an authentication schema because anybody that's going to hit this website will be prompted for a username and a password, and they'll be assigned roles that allow them to access different levels of features and functionalities in the server. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But you can either just use forms-based authentication in an integrated database, basically, to store the user logins, or if you have ADFS and you're using that in your organization, you can very easily integrate your federated provider to handle authentication. This is fully documented in our documentation of how to accomplish that. Then also, when you install it, it's going to install with our logo and our color schema and branding, but you very easily can create your own look and feel. You can remove our logos, you can add your own logos, you can create your own color schema, you can add favicons. So full branding to make it look like your report server. And you can also do that with the integrated report designer, the one that we looked at a bit earlier in the overview, and what we're going to look at a bit more soon. Besides that, also, you also have the option to change the language that's displayed for all of the strings on the report server interface and the designer. So if you need to deploy this and have people in France or some other country, such as Germany, using your application, you can basically define a preferred language for the strings. So that is some of the key setups that you need to make when you first install it. So if we come back to the reports tab here, when it's installed, you can see that we install basically a collection of sample reports. And these are some of the reports that you will find also on the Telerik Report Server demo site. And these, you can use these to work with in the report server to get a feel of how to enable your own reports. But I did also create a separate report, and we'll take a look at some of these. You can see the ones that are starred. I've actually favored some reports, and you can actually use this to allow end users to favor a collection of reports. So let's take a look at user management first of all. So when you install the report server, you will need to have a server administrator. And I'm the server administrator for this instance. That gives me unbridled privileges and access to all of the features and functionality of the server. The Telerik Report Server has extensive permissions capability to lock down any aspect. So as server administrator, I can actually manually create new users if I'm just using forms-based authentication. So I can add a new user, and I can say, for example, they are a data administrator. So they should only be able to access the data tab. They should be able to create named data sources that will be used in reports. Or I could say somebody is simply just a report reader. They can log into the report server and they'll be able to get to the reports tab, and they will be able to click on reports that they have been granted permissions to, and then be able to view them in the integrated HTML5 report viewer. We're going to take a look at that in a minute. Or I could make somebody also a report creator, which means that when they log into the server and there is a report they have access to, they click in it in order to edit it. It's going to prompt them to deploy the integrated report designer. Some browsers allow click once deployment, such as IE. Other browsers, they'll simply be given a link to download the exe and run it on their system. And it will be directly connected to this report server instance by means of an HTTPS link. So that's how you deal with authentication of your users. So let's say now you've made somebody a data administrator, or I am system administrator. So I can create new data sources to be used in Telerik reports. So you can see I actually have some sample ones already in here. I have a one that allows me to connect to a SQL database running in Azure to grab some data. And then I have a couple of local databases that are used for those sample demos, basically. AdventureWorks database. But I can also create a new connection. I just give it a name and I give it a description, and then I can use one of the data providers. For example, it could be another SQL database, and I give it the connection string, and then I just simply save it. So these will all be available now when I'm designing reports. So now also let's look at the categories. So you create categories to store reports, and these categories can be locked down again by means of permissions to only certain groups within an organization. So to create a new category, I simply click that button and I give it a name, and then I would just save it like I did when I created my reports. Then you go to the reports tab, again like we did before, and you can see that the reports are stored in these categories. So let's take a look, for example, at someone as to see how they would be able to view one of these reports. So I come into this, and if I've been granted permission, I can select one of these, such as the dashboard. If I click this link here, you'll see that it brings up an integrated web-based HTML5 report viewer so that I can view this report. And this is a great way to be able to interact with the report. So for example, in a report that was built with parameters, this one has a year parameter, I can simply clear a selection again, and I can choose to redraw the report with a new year. And what's actually happening behind the scenes is it's going back into the report server collection. It's grabbing that report. It's hydrating or building that report by mapping data in using the named data sources for that report. And then the end user has the option here again to be able to export this locally to a number of different export options, or they could select a print, and this will bring up the print preview and print layout dialog, allowing them to select portrait or landscape or fit to page or those types of things. Those are also built into the report when you design it in the designer, but they may want to toggle those. They can also hide the parameters area to have more viewing area, or zoom into the report, zoom out of that report. So there's a lot of capability to work with this report. Another very cool feature that we actually have added recently is if somebody wanted to email this report, they can simply say from to, give it a subject, choose a format that they want it emailed as, create a template for an email, and then ship that right off to somebody. Some very cool features there. So another very great thing about this viewer is that it is a fully responsive viewer, and it's a perfect solution for viewing reports in a mobile friendly environment. So basically, if you've got a small tablet, smartphone, and you access this website through it, you can see that the menu that was across the top horizontally has now become a hamburger menu, and it creates a side drawer slide in, and end users then have the option to choose from all of those export options in a very mobile friendly way. So that's how you would view a report. So now let's look at some of these other buttons up here and understand, for example, if I were granted report creator and I wanted to take a report such as the dashboard, and I wanted to be able to maybe do some editing to it with the integrated designer. So I could click design report. What that actually does is, since I had already installed the report designer previously, it brings it up on my other screen. But I can bring this over, and you can see now that that report has been pulled down as a local copy into this desktop-based designer. And The designer gives me the capability to work with it and interact with it. There's some very cool features to the designer. I don't know how well you'll see this, but you can show a grid lines. So that would allow you to drag things around and snap them to certain positions. There's a ruler also, so it helps to really, when you're creating a report, have dimensioning and make sure that, this is going to be pixel perfect and rendered exactly to the size and specifications that you're designing it as when it's printed or it's exported. So you can also see here that there is some tabs up here, for example, insert. So if I'm on the design surface here and I wanted to, for example, insert a new HTML text box that I wanted to map some data in, I could simply click this here and then it will bring up a text box and I can drag this, I can position it. If I right click on this and go to properties, you can see down here I have the properties box here, and that gives me the capability to be able to set a lot of the look and feel, so the CSS like styling that we talked about before. So very, very quickly, I just want to remove that so that doesn't mess things up. But if we go back to that report now, and let's say, for example, that we want to do something like change the look and feel of a pie chart here. So I can select a pie chart. I could actually go to the design tab and it gives me some predefined color palettes. And for example, I could simply say, I just want to make a quick change and let's change the color palette that we're using for this particular pie chart. So once I do that, I can actually go back to the Home tab. I can preview this. And you can see, that's using that new color palette now. So let's say now I want to say, let's go ahead and I want to push this back up to the server as a new version of the report that I retrieved. I can click publish here and I could say, this is a new version, right? And I can say, that it changed, if I could spell, changed pie chart colors. And then I can publish this. And if I go to the report server and I refresh this, and if I go to that dashboard report, over here, you can see under activities, it's showing that Richard edited this report. It's a new version, changed pie chart colors on the date. And when I preview this here, I have that new color schema. So you could certainly go back and forth a number of times, modify reports, and that's how you can interact with a report on your desktop with the integrated designer and modify and make changes, or the way that you would publish a brand new report from scratch. So let's look at another feature of the report server now, and that would be scheduling. So let's say, for example, you have created a report and that report resides on the server. And you now, for example, want to be able to create a new task to schedule and send a report. Let's show how you do that. So let's, for example, first take a look at a report that I'd like to send. So we'll make the product line sales report available to some managers that want to know, for example, for bikes and for specifically mountain bikes, who are the top 10 sellers of that and who are their top 10 customers, right? So that's the report. Let's go to the scheduling tab. Let's say, let's create a new task, and it's going to be a report called sales of mountain bikes, right? And I can give it a start date. So I could say today, October 17th at 12:45 p.m., this should be sent. I either want to send it one time or I want to make this a daily or weekly, monthly, or yearly report generation. I have that option. Then when I go to the Reports tab, it says select the category that that report is in, which is samples. Select the report, which was product line sales. And then what format do you want it sent as? And I can say in this case, for example, let's send it as an Acrobat PDF report. And I can either use the defaults that are bikes and mountain bikes, or I could clear this and select my own values for that particular run. You can even define start date or from date to date for the report also, because that's built in as parameters to that report. Once I've done that, I can say now this is the mail template that's going to be used to send that report as an attachment. And I have full capability to customize this. There are a number of variables that you can choose from, such as report name and execution time, or something like the showing the start date and the end dates. So you can fully customize this template. And then once I've done that, I just click save. And now you can see that this will be sent on October 17th, today at 12:45 p.m. And when I created this task, I also have subscribers for that send. So this is being sent to me because I'm a default subscriber to all reports, but I could add new subscribers, and there's a number of ways to import subscribers. So you can import large lists using a CSV or other formatted ways of doing that, which is covered in our documentation. But basically, that one's ready to go. So also now let's talk a little bit about data alerts. So as an example, if we go back to the Reports tab and we take another look at this dashboard report, what if we wanted to let a manager know that of these top 5 performing stores, the total for the year has dropped below a certain value? Let's say it drops below 300, right? So you'd want to kick off a report immediately and send it to those concerned managers, showing them the new totals. How would we do that? So let's close that. Let's go to Data Alerts tab. Let's say I want to create a new alert. And let's say this would be store sales for year. And let's say we wanted to run this at, let's say 10:17, maybe at, let's just say 2 o'clock. But I want to run it once, or I want to maybe make this, let's say, a yearly occurrence. I can choose that. I can go to the Reports tab and I can say, okay, let's select a category here, samples. Let's select that dashboard report. Let's say that this report should be sent to these managers as a PDF and using the default year, which is 2002. And then let's go to the rules and let's create a rule to be checked. So I'd say for this dashboard report, let's select a data item. So this would be, for example, the store table, the store quarters table, right? I would create a new rule, and let's say that is that the store total, so that's the year total that adds all of those quarters up, and the operator should be is less than, and let's say a value of 300, right? And if I save that, I now have a data alert that will be run when that data is checked on the date and the time that I ask it to do so. And this will be sent to the subscribers, again, that you want to add. I didn't add a subscriber here, but it's the same premise as adding subscribers when we did the scheduling. So that's how a data alert works. So I think we've seen a lot of great functionalities for the report server. And I just wanted to let you know that there are a number of other really great features to this, such as the availability of webhooks, which, for example, will allow you to tie in to this report server using C# from an external application and gain access, for example, to some event that's occurring, for example, a report generation, and then to be able to programmatically use that webhook to do something as a follow-up. So this is a very powerful server, very quick and easy to spin up, and it can be again become the repository for a collection of reports, and users can navigate directly to this report server interface and interact with it based on their roles that they have. Or you can use this as a repository. You can embed a report viewer in an external application, and you can point it to this backend to be able to serve reports to the end users through your external application so that they can go into a report viewer and they can request a specific report that's housed here, have that pulled out and viewable in your application. And I'm going to talk about the benefits of that when we go back to the slide deck and talk about the licensing structure. Okay, so let's now talk a little bit about report server licensing. So this is actually the only product that we have that's not developer-centric licensing. The report server actually, as a lightweight website that you spin up, is licensed on a per domain basis or per instance basis. So you spin it up on a publicly accessible domain or internally accessible domain. You're also allowed to set up a developer instance of that and a staging instance of that with that same license. You could also have a free failover instance, and as long as they don't run simultaneously, that license covers both. With that license, you will have a package of 15 client access licenses, also known as CALs. So these need to be distributed to anybody who wants to have a login to the report server's interface. They'll need to establish a user ID and a password, and you'll have to grant them roles. So that would typically be the server administrator that sets up this server, a data administrator who is responsible for creating data sources for it, report creators that want to take a report down to their desktop with the integrated designer that we looked at and edit and republish that, or someone that needs to log in and create scheduled tasks or data alerts. So anybody that logs into the report server interface, clicks on a category, clicks on a report link in that category and wants to view it with the integrated HTML5 report viewer needs a client access license. These are assigned specifically to users in the organization, typically using their email account. They're not floating licenses. So if you have 15 CALs for that report server, it doesn't just cover the first 15 people that are logging in. It has to be specific people in the organization, but they can be reassigned between users. Now, another thing is that I think we talked about at the end, you could actually embed a report viewer in your external application. So in the web page of your app or the form of your desktop app, and you could set that report source to point to this backend report server repository to retrieve a specific report for external viewing inside of your application. So you would need a developer to have a Telerik reporting developer license in order to embed that report viewer and to configure its report source in the Telerik REST services to point to this report server that is stood up in the background. Now, reports that are accessed through your application using this embedded report viewer can use an anonymous guest user account. And so anybody then that comes in through your application and accesses a report using this anonymous account doesn't need client access and licensing. But what I would really recommend is that you contact Telerik Sales if you really would like to discuss your specific use case and the requirements that you have for generating, showing, editing reports. And then we can help to determine the optimal licensing package. So that's it. That was a long one, and I really appreciate you staying today for this presentation. We will be actually covering the key questions from the Q&A session in the follow-up blog post. But do send ongoing questions to sales@Telerik or tweet us using hashtag HeyTelerik. Again, thanks for attending.